I remember a case that came to my attention as a consultation, a therapist consultation. The therapist had noticed that the client was very behind with her bill. And actually, that was quite unusual because the client had always paid her monthly statements on time. And so the therapist kind of geared up to say, as kindly as she could, we should talk about your bill. And immediately triggered the attached part and the fight part. The therapist had a right to talk about the bill. She wasn't using an inappropriate tone of voice and body language, but she didn't know that she was talking to a child part. And that child part felt enormous shame. I think for the child part, it was humiliation. Right? We have to talk about your bill was interpreted by the child part as we have to talk about what you did wrong. And that triggered a crisis in what had been a very stable relationship. The fight part was unforgiving. Right? I can't believe that you did that. You know my history. You know how I was shamed. How could you have done that? And the poor therapist, who was a wonderful therapist, kept trying to process it rationally. So tip number one, we can't process rationally with parts. Because remember, the parts are not connected to the prefrontal cortex. They're connected to subcortical areas of the brain. So the therapist came to me after months and months of this crisis in the therapy, where she and the client just went around and around and around. The therapist started to feel abused, not in the child abuse sense, but she felt that she was being treated very badly. She didn't know it was a part, right? Because that changed the whole understanding. So she was inadvertently dysregulating the system even more and more as she tried to process this with the client. And what she needed and finally was able to do was to forget the rational processing and talk right brain to right brain with the parts. Meaning, speaking to that ashamed part, using her voice and body language to say, I am so sorry that I said something that made you feel so humiliated. It was very wrong of me, and I understand why you're angry. You're right. I was thinking of irrational problem solving. I wasn't thinking about how triggering it would be. And the more warmth and care she put into her voice, the more the client's parts started to relax. She and the client decided together that they had reached the end. But now that the parts felt soothed, they could talk about how much they'd accomplished and how beginning again with a new therapist was a big step for the client who had not, because the client couldn't leave her abusive parent, her humiliating parent, but she could choose to start anew on behalf of her parts. So once we begin to use right brain to right brain communication, we have to think about how we use our voices, our tone, our pacing. Right? Is it soft and slow and soothing? Is it hypnotic? Is it casual? Is it more strong and energetic? Is it more playful? I remember a client who was triggered by empathic tones. When I said, I know this must be a difficult time for you, she was furious. Are you calling me pathetic? And so I learned what she needed when she was having a hard time was for me to say, oh shit, really? Oh, that's a fucking mess, right? You shouldn't have to deal with that. That felt empathic because I was using a tone of voice that she could believe that her fight part could hear without getting defensive.